Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of the IRENA Insights webinar series. My name is Karan Kochar, and I'm joining from IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center in Bonn, Germany. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I would like to introduce IRENA and a webinar series. IRENA is an intergovernmental organization with 170 member countries and another 14 countries in their accession process. We support countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future and serve as the principal platform for international cooperation, a center of excellence, and a repository of policy, technology, resource, and financial knowledge on renewable energy. And because our analytical work and our engagement with our members generates a lot of valuable insights, we're constantly looking for more ways to share these insights with you. And that is why we launched this webinar series. We have organized over 60 webinars on various topics, and you can check them all on our IRENA events website. The link to that will be in the presentation slides. We understand that there are many longer deep dive webinars out there, but our aim is to keep these webinars short and sweet, lasting approximately 30 minutes. While we cannot cover everything in this time frame, we hope to give you enough information, and more than that, the sources of more in-depth information to help you explore the topic further. Next slide, please. So today, in the next 30 minutes, we will hear from Deborah Iris and Lourdes Zamora, who lead IRENA's work on renewable energy costs. They will share insights from one of IRENA's flagship report, Renewable Power Generation Costs in 2023. Next slide, please. But before I hand the microphone over to them, a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and posted on the IRENA events website. You are on mute, but we would encourage you to use the Q&A or the chat function to ask any questions. And without any further ado, let me welcome Deborah and Lourdes to the IRENA Insights webinar series. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Karen, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's a pleasure to present on the Renewable Power Generation Costs in 2023 report. And before diving into the presentation, I really want to share that I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to work with Michael. Michael Taylor was the head of the Renewable Energy Cost Status and Outlook team. He left IRENA before the completion of this work, after working 12 years for the agency, and now we have the legacy to continue publishing annually renewable energy cost and performance data. Now, moving to the presentation and setting the scene, last year, countries committed to the Global Renewable Energy Efficiency Pledge. Countries should then triple renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency by 2030. What does it represent in numbers? According to IRENA's projection, is that we need an increase of around 7.8 terawatts in 8 years and an average on new capacity additions of a little bit less than 1 terawatt each year. Now, looking at the annual additions, and 2023 marked an unprecedented acceleration in new renewable capacity additions with an increase of 54% and an installed capacity of 473 gigawatt. Solar PV broke the record, and this technology has been breaking records each year and accounted for 73% of all newly installed capacity. But of course, we can't forget about the other technologies because they've been contributing, of course, in a minor scale, but still very important, and with new commission projects online each year, and those are onshore and offshore wind, hydropower, and bioenergy. Now, looking to the costs, and here we have two different comparisons. We are going to start with the one on the left side, and here it's a year-on-year comparison between 2022 and 2023. And we can see that the global weighted average LCOE decreased for major technologies except for bioenergy and geothermal. And the reason for that is that for geothermal, we see only few projects each year being deployed, so cost goes up and down each year. We don't really see a clear trend. For bioenergy, what happened in 2023 is that most of the deployment has been in countries more expensive, especially OECD markets. And same story, cost goes up and down. We don't see a clear trend. And we should also mention that there is a diverse set of technologies and also feedstocks. Now, looking to the chart on the left, on the right side, And here we have the historical cost trends between 2010 and 2023. And what we can see is that the global weighted average LCOE decreased by 90% for solar PV, 70% for onshore wind and CSP, and 63% for offshore wind. Now, looking the figure in more detail, and what we have here is that we have dots for each year that represent the global weighted average LCOE. The band around it shows the 95th percentile and 5th percentile. And we also added the fossil fuel cost range that shows the upper and lower costs. What is interesting to note is that CSP, even though it's the less deployed technology, we see that in 2023, the LCOE is at the middle range of the fossil fuel costs, showing that this technology had a really good learning curve, leading to cost decrease. For offshore wind, what we see in 2023 is that the global weighted average LCOE is really close to the lower limit of fossil fuel costs, showing that we can expect then in the recent years and in the future that this technology might be as well very competitive. Now, for both PV and onshore wind, the LCOE is undercutting the LCOE from new fossil fuel projects, and this shows that both offer very competitive electricity. And now, looking at that in a different perspective, the global weighted average LCOE of onshore wind was 67% lower than the weighted average fossil fuel option in 2023, while for utility scale PV, it was 56% lower. This is related to the figure on the left side. Now, looking to the chart on the right side, and here what we have is that the zero as the baseline, every project below that was more expensive than fossil fuels, and all of the projects above were more competitive. And the color legend shows which technology those projects were. And what we see in 2023 is that 81% of the new utility scale capacity added cost less than the weighted average fossil fuel option. Now, looking to the fossil fuel, we've seen an LCOE decrease in 2023, and this is really clear in the charts that we have here. We can definitely see the difference between 2021, 22, and 23, because in 22, prices were really high, and then they returned to historical levels in 23. And this decrease in price was mainly driven by a decline in electricity demand during 2023. And if we look at the European example, we can say that this is a result of a decline in energy-intensive industry. There was also a decrease in the demand for heating. The sector itself, it's more electrified. We have more EVs and also heat pumps and a greater share of renewable energy in the electricity generation. So it's really important to know then that despite we have this fossil fuel LCOE decreased in 2023, the renewable power generation continued to be more competitive than fossil fuel options. And this shows that renewables represent energy savings. And what we have here is a chart that we are interested in the electricity sector fuel savings annually, comparing 2010 and 2023. And the idea here was actually to show how the sector evolved across the different regions, but also the different technologies. What we can see is that in 2023, Asia was responsible for the main annual savings, reaching $29 billion, and this is related, of course, to the deployment that they have in the region, while in Africa it remained quite modest. While we look for the technologies in 2010, hydro was one of the major contributors, and now in 2023, we see this shift towards more solar PV and onshore wind projects. And these two represented 87% of the total savings, which demonstrates that the trend in capacity additions are not distributed across the different technologies. So the key message here is that an effort is needed to accelerate renewable power generation deployment first across the different technologies, and then second across the regions, because this will be really important to meet the goals set by the Tripling Pledge.
So before getting into the latest individual technology cost trends, it is important to highlight the primary data source of the report, which is the IRENA Renewable Cost Database. This database contains cost and performance data at a project level from more than 23K projects developed over the past 10 to 15 years, representing more than 2.7 terawatts of capacity, and it is continuously updated with information on newly commissioned projects each year. The full database is not publicly accessible, unfortunately, but we have a data file with the data of all the charts and tables from the report accessible for download. The charts in this presentation are from the report, so if any of them interest you now or while reading the report, we invite you to download the data from the IRENA website. Now we will continue to the technology trends. In this presentation, we will focus on solar PV, onshore wind, offshore wind, and battery storage. For insights into the other technologies or for a deeper look into the ones that we will cover in this presentation, please check out the full report.
We start with solar photovoltaic, and here we have the 3-panel chart showing the total installed cost, capacity factor, and levelized cost of electricity trends between 2010 and 2023. And in 2023, 373 gigawatt were commissioned, where 238 gigawatt only in Asia, and this represents 63% of the total deployment. Now, looking to the trends between 2010 and 2023, the global weighted average LCOE decreased by 90%, reaching 0.044 USD per kilowatt hour, and total installed cost fell by 86%, reaching 758 USD per kilowatt. And there are actually many factors that contributed to the increasing solar PV technology competitiveness and cost decrease, and they are mainly related to lower module costs, but also improve efficiency, manufacturing optimization, and also design innovation. Now, looking to the markets, and here you're gonna see a slightly difference between the charts from the previous years, because we are interested in having a longer time frame and checking the last 5 years. So it's a comparison between 2018 to 2023. And despite having fluctuations on the year-on-year costs in the major markets, what it's important to note is that in the long term, we still see a decline. While looking at the year-on-year change, so between 2022 and 2023, the cost declines in 14 of the markets that we have here in this figure, and the major LCOE reductions were in the top markets in Europe, United States, Australia, and China. Total installed costs, they are also impacted by the modules and silicon prices. And we've seen that module costs, they continue to decline, driven again by manufacturing optimization and also efficiency gains. Between 2009 and 2023, the weighted average cost of crystalline modules, they declined 92%. We added here a zoom in the last years, focusing between 2022 and 2023 to show how the decrease has been really important. And the explanation for that is that during 2021 and 2022, the polysilicon prices increased due to a disruption in the supply chain. Then the production recovered while the manufacturers, they were racing to supply the rising PV demand. This generated oversupply of polysilicon, then accelerated the module price decline during 2023. And this was mainly due then to the high inventory levels. But of course, the prices are not only related to modules, and we've seen really sustained balance of system cost decline, and they made up about 61% of the total installed cost of utility scale PV plants. And here we have a chart on the PV total installed cost breakdown. We should note as well that also might be some variations in the countries that we show each year, because it really depends on the availability of the data that we get, because it's really based on actual project breakdown costs. And what it's important to note is that while solar has become a mature technology, we still see some regional cost variations. They persist, but we see that actually this difference is narrowing but it's also related to the fact that the countries, they have their own market scale and also specificity. And despite this regional variation, we see that there is a convergence on price for the other technologies, the other categories, hardware, installation, and soft costs. And basically, the main drivers for balance of system cost reductions is the competitive market and also increased installer experience.
Now moving to onshore wind, here we have a three-panel chart with the cost trends between 2010 and 2023. Starting from right to left, the onshore wind LCOE decreased by 70%. The 23 value was $0.033 per kilowatt hour. And two important things about this value are that it's the lowest global weighted average LCOE compared to the other renewable technologies deployed in 2023. And also in this year, 104 gigawatts of onshore wind projects were commissioned, and all of them had a cost of electricity cheaper than fossil fuels. So this shows how competitive onshore wind is. About the capacity factor between 2010 and 2023, it has increased from 27% to 36%. There's a year-on-year decrease given by China's share change, which typically has a lower wind resource. In 2022, China's share was 47% of the new capacity additions, less than a half, but in 2023, it increased to 66%. The global weighted average total install cost of onshore wind fell by 49% between 2010 and 2023, with a 12% year-on-year decrease. The fall was driven by continued cost declines in China. Indeed, in 2023, Brazil and China had install costs lower than the global average, and this year, for the first time, China was the first market to achieve a cost below $1,000 per kilowatt. One of the key factors shaping wind energy costs is the price of wind turbines, which typically dominate the total install cost of a project. So here we can see the relationship between the low Chinese turbine prices and the low total install cost in China. In 2023, the value for China was $233 per kilowatt, represented by the red line. It has decreased by 73% from the 2010 value, and this drop can be attributed to sustained pressure from developers. It is a contrast with the other prices, which in 2023 ranged between $706 per kilowatt and $1,040 per kilowatt. Compared to 2010, these have reduced between 41% and 64%. The prices have fluctuated, showing significant volatility, which depends in different factors. For example, Vestas pricing depends on other regions, and then for BNEF values, the behavior we see here, the green lines in the last quarter of 2023, is influenced by shifts in the market share of different turbine classes. Despite these reductions, the future remains uncertain. The supply chains and manufacturers' profitability leave future pricing trends unclear. About the technological improvements over the past decade, onshore wind turbines have undergone remarkable advances with larger wind turbines. Here we see the trends of turbine capacity and rotor diameters for the major markets on which we have data. In 2023, Sweden, that is the dark blue line, had the largest turbine capacity at 5.8 megawatts, and China had the biggest rotor side. It is represented by the red line at 184 meters. These advances in turbine technology have contributed to reduce costs, but there are also other factors that have contributed or have an impact, such as the site configuration, economies of scale, O&M cost, or the growth maturity of the market. For offshore wind, nearly 11 gigawatts were commissioned during 2023, around 8 gigawatts in Asia, from these 7 gigawatts in China, and the rest 3 gigawatts in Europe. Also seeing at the cost trends with the three-panel chart, between 2010 and 2023, the global weighted average total install cost fell 48% to $2,800 per kilowatt. The capacity factor increased from 38% to 41%, and the LCOE declined by 63% to $0.075 per kilowatt hour, which is more than 2 times the onshore value. There are logistical considerations surrounding offshore wind installations that significantly affect cost. Two important factors to consider are the water depth and the distance from shore. Looking at trends in Europe, China, and the rest of the world, we see a growing shift towards placing wind farms in deeper waters and farther from the coast. This trend is most pronounced in Europe, which is the chart on the left, with more projects being built over 60 kilometers from shore and in waters deeper than 40 meters. Also in this chart, the dark blue circle more to the right was so far in 2023 the farthest from shore wind farm, located around 131 kilometers from the coast at its closest point. Like onshore wind, offshore wind farms also have had advances in turbine technologies, with a trend towards larger rotor diameters and higher hoop heights. Since 2010, rotor diameters have grown by 84%, reaching an average of 206 meters, and the hoop heights increased by 25%, now having an average value of 126 meters. These innovations have made it possible to develop projects in areas with lower than what used to be the average wind speed. For example, we see here on the chart on the right that in Europe, capacity factor have increased while wind speed have slightly decreased. So in addition to allowing offshore wind to be deployed in areas that were once unsuitable, the technological improvements have also increased energy output and expanded the potential of wind energy.
Now moving to the last part of our presentation, and this is a new addition to the report, a chapter on battery storage. If you're really interested in this topic, you can go straight forward to chapter 6. Now, starting with the projected battery storage growth to 2030, here we have a chart from another report published this year, the Tripling Renewable Power by 2030, that see how the market is expected to grow. And as the energy transition accelerates to 2030, the system will need long duration energy storage, and of course, a combination of other flexibility measures to relieve grid constraints to the new renewable power connections and generation. So the global energy storage market, it is growing. We see that energy shifting is the main application of battery storage. And in terms of long duration energy storage, pump storage is still the most competitive technology, with a global average installed cost of 149 kilowatt hour USD per kilowatt hour. Now moving to the battery storage cost reduction, between 2010 and 2023, the cost of installed energy storage projects fell by 89%, reaching 273 USD per kilowatt hour. And those reductions were mainly driven by technological developments, improved materials efficiency, and manufacturing process. And looking from the manufacturing perspective, the market growth created competition between suppliers across the whole value chain, also leading to cost decrease. Now, when we look to the installations in 2023, it reached 95.9 gigawatt hour. So 2022 registered a record in the annual capacity additions, and those new additions were mainly dominated by China and the United States, because both countries set energy storage targets, pushing this increase in the storage additions.
So in this presentation, we have looked to some of the major trends in renewable energy in 2023. For more information and details, we invite you to check the full report. But now, to wrap things up, here are 4 key takeaways that we would like to share with you. First, PV, CSP, onshore, offshore wind, hydro, and battery storage projects experience a cost decrease in 2023, with PV having the highest. Second, the competitiveness of renewable power generation remains, even though fossil fuel fire prices have decreased. Another thing to look at now that the energy system is shifting to a one with more renewables is that the focus should be on overcoming existing challenges to meet the triple goal and the climate goals. This includes targeted investments, system planning, and improving grid infrastructure. So related to this, the four key takeaway is that an accelerated deployment of battery storage is needed to increase the flexibility of electricity systems.
Thank you everyone for joining today, and now we move to the Q&A session.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Lourdes, for the insightful presentation. To our audience, we encourage you to take advantage of the chat feature to ask any questions you may have. We have already received some questions in the chat feature, but we encourage you to use the Q&A feature also. In the meantime, we can get started on the questions we have received already. First question is related to offshore wind. And people want to know, how does the market diversification look like in the upcoming years for this particular technology, that is offshore wind?
Okay, yeah, I'll take this one. And we can see it from two perspectives, the technological aspect and also new markets, new countries. So regarding the technology, fixed bottom foundations continue to have the biggest share of deployment, but floating offshore wind has now entered the early commercial stage. In fact, last year, France recently announced the winner of what is likely to be the world's first truly commercial scale floating offshore wind farm. So we will start to see floating offshore being deployed more. And if you would like to know more about it, there's an IRENA report about floating offshore. And then for new countries, new markets, the United States has projects under construction. So it will emerge as one of the next markets. And then there are other countries that are also taking action. For example, Australia is awarding feasibility licenses for some projects, and this is one of the first steps before building the wind farm. So then we will see wind farms there. And in Europe, there are countries that have launched tender plans. So yeah, we will see advances in technology, considering the floating offshore. We will see offshore wind expanding in Europe and Asia, and also beginning to develop in other countries.
Thanks, Lourdes. So you guys spoke a lot about how LCOE has decreased in the last 13 years. Do you see any rough outlooks how the LCOE will develop in the next years or decades?
Yes. So actually, the main focus of this report is to check historical trends. So we look at the past, but of course, cost projections is something that usually people are also interested as well. What we've seen is that between 2010 and 2023, the LCOE, they decreased for all of the major technologies. And now that we have countries that they made a consensus on the tripping pledge, we should expect that, of course, we're going to have more additions in the future. So this would definitely be one of the drivers that it's going to accelerate the LCOE reductions. And it's part of the virtuous cycle as well, when we have long-term policy support that accelerates the renewable deployment, and then this leads to technology improvements, and then of course the cost reductions. So we see that this would definitely contribute to the increased scale, and then of course competitiveness of the renewable technology markets. So we see that, yeah, the LCOE might continue the decrease in the next years.
Great, thank you so much. Unfortunately, our time is up for today. I see still a couple of questions, one on prices in China and other on the methodology. I believe these answers can be found in the report, and I would encourage you to go for a more in-depth analysis on the question. I would like to thank Deborah and Ludus for their time and for sharing their knowledge and insights on the latest work. I would also like to thank all of you for joining us today and for your time and attention. We hope you learned something new. The recording and the slides will be posted on the IRENA events webpage for those who missed any part of the webinar or who would like to go through the webinar again. They will be posted in a few days. I wish you a great rest of the day, and I hope to see you soon for our upcoming webinars. Thank you.